I believe that the goal of the news should be to present information to you so that you can decide the best way to live your life, who to vote for, and your own opinions. But over the past several years, maybe 10 years, we've seen the rise of what's called mission-driven storytelling. I experienced this firsthand. They found a path towards money, that's my opinion, that by pushing ideology and outrage content, they could get clicks, shares, and profit. Because of this, they had to give an excuse as to why a news company was pushing an opinion and calling for action. They call this mission-driven storytelling, saying there's no such thing as objective journalism. And because of it, we are worse off. I believe it's plaguing the media and resulting in people losing their minds. But it's not without consequences to those who are addicted to the drug that is woke outrage. Many of these companies started bringing on woke activists because they cost less money because of they're ideologically driven, and because they can just naturally write this outrage content that hits all the keywords and gets all the shares. But then, eventually, people get tired of it. Your company loses money, you can't maintain growth, you lay people off, and you collapse. For Gawker, that story's a bit different. See, Gawker got sued by Hulk Hogan, funded by Peter Thiel, and that's this whole other story. But in the end, Gawker had to sell. They sold to Univision for a decent amount of money, not as much as maybe they were worth. And Univision thought they were going to have something here with the Gawker network. All of these different websites, like I believe it was Gizmodo, Deadspin, Jezebel, etc. Many woke brands. However, it turns out they lost a ton of money doing so. Not only did the websites not make money, although I believe a lot of people claimed they did, I have some reporting that says they were losing money, they sold at a huge loss. Now here's the interesting thing, Gawker.com was sold somewhere else. It wasn't included, that's my understanding. It was sold to Bustle Digital Group. Here's the big update. They are no longer going to relaunch Gawker. Now you might not be familiar with Gawker, but let me just tell you, it was a woke media brand. It was the parent. It was the start of many of these outrage clickbait websites. Bustle was going to relaunch Gawker. They faced a ton of problems. The staff was upset. They complained about people who weren't woke enough running the company, who were, who had bad opinions. So one of the staff members apparently was not woke. This caused some kind of controversy, and now, for whatever reason, they've announced they will not be relaunching. Get woke, go broke, as it were. Many of these digital media companies were addicted to the outrage because there was a short-term gain. But in the end, it was a long-term loss. And now not only are we seeing that Gawker won't be relaunched, the number of layoffs this year is up to 3,200 in media. We're hearing that Vice may have to acquire Refinery 29. They're trying to consolidate as they bleed viewers and struggle to survive. But this, they warn, will result in more layoffs. And we're also hearing that other Gawker properties, which merged with the Gizmodo network and other Univision properties, are now facing heat. Reporters are upset with their senior staff. So here's what I want to do. I want to look through these particular stories, talk about how leftist digital media is failing and it's just not working out. But I also want to talk about certain instances today where we can see exactly why the news media has failed. So before we get started, I'm going to make a very short announcement and keep this very brief. Subverse, which is my media company, has officially opened up crowd investment to the public. Currently, we are, as of filming of this video, we are at $647,354 of our $1,070,000 goal. So more than halfway there, quite a bit. And we are on track, I'm told, to break a record for the fastest crowd investment in US history. This is relatively new, so it's not like it's the big deal. But you can find out more at wefunder.com/subverse, where it is now available to the public to become a part owner in a new media venture. But let's get to the news. Gawker will not be relaunched. They say Gawker will remain in limbo. The reboot of the news and gossip site, now 3 years dormant, will not be going forward as planned, at least for now. Bustle Digital Group, whose founder and CEO Brian Goldberg bought the assets of Gawker in a bankruptcy auction last year, said it has canceled the planned September relaunch of the notoriously snarky property and laid off the staff that was hired to run it. We are postponing the Gawker relaunch. For now, we are focusing company resources and efforts on our most recent acquisitions, Mike, The Outline, Nylon, and Inverse. Interestingly, Mike is also the subject of controversy because they are routinely, there was a big piece in Huffington Post recently talking about how Mike was chasing outrage for money, and eventually it couldn't be sustained. They didn't know what they were doing. To me, this woke outrage is a drug. It is an addiction. You get those clicks, it feels good, but it doesn't build an audience. Traffic is not an audience. There was no loyalty, just intermediary, just varying degrees of outrage. People would click a story because they're outraged by it, but they wouldn't come back. And so in the end, you just fail. The drug is killing these companies. Here's the interesting thing. They mention they laid off the Gawker staff, and they want to focus on Mike, but they also want to focus on Inverse and Nylon. Well, there are some more stories here. For one, over here, Vice's planned takeover of Refinery 29 may result in culture clash and layoffs. In one of these stories, we can see right here, look, Nylon editor Gabrielle Korn exits after Bustle acquisition. So we heard about how they want to focus on Nylon, okay? Well, they just lost their editor. We're also hearing that there's going to be layoffs at Inverse as well. In this story from Business Insider, 3,200 people have lost their jobs so far this year in media landslide. They mention, in the last month, layoffs have hit CTV, Mad Magazine, Inverse, and Entrepreneur, bringing the total number of media layoffs in 2019 to over 3,200, according to Business Insider's tally. So I'm not going to read through all of these. I just want to talk about why I think this is happening. Gawker is not being relaunched. He wants to focus on Inverse and Nylon. They just lost key staff members. They're laying people off at Inverse. Here's the thing. Trust in media is at a ridiculous low. In this story from Washington Examiner, we can see trust in media hits bottom as 60% say sources pay for stories. We can see that of these institutions, military, law enforcement, university, Supreme Court, executive branch, the press, and Congress, the press has the highest rating of hardly any confidence at all. Then according to the Knight Foundation, they say most U.S. adults, including more than 9 in 10 Republicans, say they personally have lost trust in the news media in recent years. At the same time, 69% of those who have lost trust say that can be restored. So there's good news. Perhaps what should be done is these companies should avoid pushing their agendas to make money. So let's talk about pushing an agenda. The first thing I want to highlight is this funny story from Vox.com. Aaron Rupar. Trump commemorates 9/11 first responders by making it all about him. This story is rather interesting because they highlight this tweet and they make some insinuations. First, Kyle Griffin tweeted, Trump claims without evidence to an audience that includes 9/11 first responders, I was down there at Ground Zero also, but I'm not considering myself a first responder, but I was down there. I spent a lot of time down there with you. Now, why did Kyle Griffin say without evidence? Why did he add those two words? Trump claims without evidence. Claims. It's really, really interesting that Vox would highlight this tweet. How hard would it be to do a quick Google search to see if Donald Trump was actually down on the ground following 9/11? Why, it would take you but 15 seconds, I would imagine. Yet for some reason, this guy didn't do that and then wonders why Trump didn't cite evidence. What do you mean without evidence? What is Trump supposed to do? Pull up a picture of himself down on the ground in New York City during 9/11? He's telling people he was there. What evidence do you expect someone to present when they're saying they did a thing? I mean, how hard would... For those who are listening on the podcast, I stopped talking because I clicked over to an image of Donald Trump on the ground just after 9/11. Do these people think that 9/11 happened and then a day later it was over? Trump was down there on the ground. Now what he was doing, I don't know, but he was there. There's a photo of him. There's more than one photo. There's interviews of him down there, memes going around showing that Trump, a New Yorker who owns property and is a real estate developer, had an interest in being there as an American, as a New Yorker, and as someone who runs construction companies, or contracts them at least. He was there. How hard is it to pull up Snopes.com to see there is a photo of him there? Why would Kyle Griffin claim without evidence? Why would Vox highlight this? Well, it's actually a bit funnier because then Aaron Rupar goes on to claim in this story from Daily Wire, Trump suggests he was a 9/11 first responder. I'm sorry, what was that quote we read from that other guy who was framing the narrative? Trump said, I am not considering myself a first responder. You wonder why trust in media is down. You wonder why these companies are laying people off. It's because they lie. It's because they are lazy. It's because they won't do their jobs. Kyle Griffin, let me introduce you to Google. Okay? Go to Google, type in Trump 9/11 on the ground. And what do you find? Snopes with an image of Trump in New York after 9/11. What evidence should Trump present? Should he carry this picture in his pocket so he can hold it up when he says he was there? That's insane. If I said I went to the skate park yesterday, would you say Tim Pool claims without evidence he was at the skate park yesterday? That's insane. It's insane. What has the media become? I think it's just become, look, these companies are laying people off. It's a combination of desperation, greed, and laziness. That's really what I see. And the scary thing is, when you look at this Vox story, which is just completely insane if you ask me, how about this? NBC Universal invests $200 million in Vox Media from 2015. $200 million in Vox Media so that they can not even look at Google and put up this ridiculous tweet and then claim the exact opposite. Aaron Rupar, who tweeted this, Trump suggests he was a 9/11 first responder. He's the person who wrote this story. He took a clip of Donald Trump saying, I'm not considering myself a first responder, and then claimed the exact opposite. And you know why? Because many people won't watch the clip, and these people know it. So either they're completely inept, don't understand how to do basic journalism, don't know how to truly understand and dissect information and present responsibly. But you know what? Even after all this, I'll tell you what. NewsGuard gives Vox a green check mark saying, hey, good to go. Vox is trash, if you were to ask me. Now, they do say that Vox does not handle the difference between news and opinion responsibly, so I can accept that. But this is outright fake news. They use framing devices to mislead you and manipulate you. And that's why I feel like that's why I think media is collapsing. It's why I think we will continue to see stories about conflict between the business side of things and the staff side. These people, I don't know what's going on with them, but I'll tell you this. For the Gawker relaunch, my advice, do not hire any of these woke activists to do journalists. They're not journalists. They will clash with you, they will complain, and they will demand to write woke nonsense that won't make any money and will cause the business to fail. Now look, journalism shouldn't be about necessarily making money, but news outlets need to be able to survive. There's the nonprofit route where you can take donations, but in the end, there needs to be a blend of responsible reporting and information that is valuable to the public that they are willing to read. When you go woke, chasing outrage for money, you will fail. If you only produce strange, esoteric facts and information that has no bearing on the American people, you will fail too. The reality is, let's talk about things that are important to the American people, which often does involve outrageous stories. Some, very much so, because people need to be informed about things that may actually make them angry. But you don't want to always do that. And more importantly, you don't have to frame the narrative to squeeze out those extra little clicks. Here's what we do over at Subverse, okay? It's editorially independent from what I'm producing here. But I'll show you this. We cover the stories that we think are the most important for the day. That may be Trump addressing the social media censorship and bias issue at the Social Media Summit, of which I was an attendee. Or it may have to do with something like Uyghur protests and Chinese oppression, or even Sudan internet blackouts. You can see these videos didn't get a ton of traffic, but they were important, talking about freedom, liberty, and international conflict. The goal is presenting information that we think is particularly important, but also bringing you stories that sometimes actually do well. U.S. Air Force does not want you to storm Area 51, a video that Subverse produced 6 days ago. Admittedly, I'm not running the editorial of this. It's separate from this content. 45,000 views. I think that's pretty good in my opinion. But you can look over at the video just below at 10,000 views, because the reality is sometimes the news, it's not going to do that well, and there's nothing you can do about it. But when you play the game that these companies play, when you chase after that drug, eventually you will find you'll collapse. And that's what we know about Mike.com. Huffington Post wrote about this. I believe Tablet wrote about this. I believe it was Tablet. where Mike was chasing outrage endlessly, just sensational, outrageous content, whether it mattered to people or not. Here's what I try to do on these channels. These are political commentary channels, Tim Pool and Timcast. On the main channel, I try to present the most pressing story of the day. So you will find a lot of similar stories. It's the big news. It's politics, it's Trump, it's the Democrats, it's the media, it's layoffs. The second channel that I have is mostly smaller stories, individual instances that aren't really that important, but I feel like talking about, so I do. Now think about what these big media companies do. They will produce nonsensical stories that have no bearing on the world because they know it'll generate outrage and get clicks. They'll write about a cop, arresting one guy in a small town in the middle of nowhere because they want that police brutality story. Well, I think those stories are important, for sure. We have to focus on what is really having an impact on the world, and we have to prioritize. In my opinion, many of these companies prioritize small stories that don't have a big impact, but that will make you angry. Sometimes we got to talk about Sudan because there was an internet blackout and internet freedoms are important when we see how other countries are dealing with Facebook, Twitter, or otherwise. Sometimes we have to make sure we're talking about things that are important, otherwise we'll just fizzle out. We can't only talk about, small foreign conflict. But that's the point. When you target people to make that money, eventually it hurts you. And then we can see what Vox did. Saying the exact opposite of what Trump did, why would anyone then be surprised to find out most US adults, including 9 in 10 Republicans, have lost trust in news media? Who's going to trust the media when they keep hiring people like this? I know I certainly won't. There is a website that talks about it's the SPJ, Society of Professional Journalists, and they have a code of ethics. And I'll tell you something. When I talked about what Subversive's goals were, people started insulting me, saying I was biased or whatever, and I said, don't worry about that. It's editorially independent from me as a person. There are other journalists who run that show who do believe in the SPJ code of ethics. And when I said that, they laughed and they eschewed the code of ethics. People on Twitter were laughing, saying, oh, please, code of ethics. And there you have it. These are people who are biased, manipulative, who have a political agenda, and then we can come to this story. Vox.com has an employee who advocates political violence. How can you trust in a news media when they are saying that someone should get violent towards you to humiliate you? That's Carlso Maza of Vox, who tweeted out that you should throw milkshakes at people. That's wrong. It's illegal. It's a crime. How, in my opinion, a news organization or someone that claims to be a news organization that's funded to the tune of $200 million can have staff members advocating violence is beyond me. It really is. But why in the hell would anybody trust you when your own staff advocate political violence? When your own staff writes stories claiming Trump's claims without evidence to an audience that I was on the ground? Did you even bother to do any work at all? They didn't. It's no surprise to me then we can see stories like this from Forbes. U.S. media among the most polarized in the world because they're continually hiring woke outrage writers, activists. They're justifying it. I was at an event, VidCon, a couple of years ago, where the president of Now This News said they are working with, I don't know if it's hiring into the company, but they were working with anti-Trump activists at the highest levels. Why would anyone trust you? So we can see where this leads. For one, eventually your content fizzles out. Nobody wants to watch it. But then you can see that, so this is a story about how layoffs are impending. But then you can see that your woke staff will continue to fight with you because you can come and say, listen, I get that you're upset that, this person did this thing, but it's not the biggest story in the world. And we need to make sure we're talking about issues that have a big impact that people need to know about, and they'll get mad at you. You will face heat from your own reporters. In this instance, mostly about hiring older white guys. You will then end up with a racist staff that is angry at the color of the skin they'll be angry that you hired people, not based on what those people can do, but because of the color of their skin. Congratulations. You are hiring racists. They'll make it impossible for you to run your business. They'll drive it into the ground. They'll quit. They'll smear you. And then you'll have to do what Gawker did. Cancel the relaunch. Now, I'll end by saying I don't know if Gawker canceled the relaunch because of this, but I do know there was a big controversy over one of the staff members being insensitive and posting outrageous things. Then there were other staff members who were upset, and there was a culture clash. And that's what we can see here. Vice planned takeover of Refinery 29 may result in a culture clash. Yup. You're going to see people complaining about old white men and all that stuff. Here we go. Let's read this. They say, one rival digital executive said, the cultures are oil and water, misogyny meets feminism. When they merge, there will be very deep cuts on the refinery side. Vice will gut them. Yep. So the collapse continues. I don't know. This was kind of all over the place. Admittedly, I've been rather frustrated by media. There's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, and I am exhausted. I was up late watching the silly debates. Oh, man. But here's the important takeaway. Gawker media is done. The media is collapsing. They're not recovering. I don't know what to say. You know, these are companies that were funded to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars or more, and they can't quite figure it out. I'm not saying I have all the answers. Certainly not. I mentioned Subverse. You can go to wefunder.com/Subverse if you think we do. But I don't know. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Comment below. Next segment will be at youtube.com/TimCastNews starting at 6 p.m. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you then.